So this new revelation that Nicola was high risk, it changes everything, doesn't it?
Not really. The inquiry will have been proceeding on that basis from the start. It was obvious to anyone who understands how the police operate that it was going to be classified as high risk from the outset because of the level of activity there was from day one. It probably also explains why her partner apparently called the police so quickly after finding out that her phone and dog had been discovered, that there was this history of concern and therefore a vulnerability, a distinct possibility that she may have come to some harm, and so she would be high risk from the start. So in relation to the inquiry, it won't change anything at all because that's been the case from the outset.
But in relation to the direction or the nature of the inquiry, it does change things, doesn't it? In as far as the theory she was abducted or maybe she was in the river. And now, is this looking more like, and of course we're only speculating, that if she had issues with alcohol and menopause, it's more likely that she, according to the classification, is likely to self-harm?
Indeed, the police haven't said that. It may or may not be the case. But it certainly would not be unusual for that to be associated with those other two aspects. The police have been very confident from the start that no one else was involved, and that somehow she has ended up in the river. I think this probably explains that as well. And it still remains their working hypothesis that is what has happened. I must stress, as they stress, that doesn't mean that all of the possibilities are being ignored. They're constantly keeping their eyes and ears open for anything that suggests there might be another explanation for her disappearance. But as things stand, there's nothing really that signposts anything away from this working hypothesis they have. And so I think we can expect to see searches continuing in and around the river for the foreseeable future.
Peter Kirkham, there's obviously been this unprecedented interest in this case from the public, from the, whatever you want to call them, keyboard warriors or armchair detectives. And yet, do you think it is justifiable, any of the criticism of the police? I mean, they did this extraordinary press conference yesterday, which seemed to have the intention of what's the word I'm looking for? Dispelling a lot of the myths that were being put out there by these keyboard warriors. And yet it actually ended up raising more questions than it answered by saying that she had these vulnerabilities, that she was high risk. And they then had to U-turn on that. I mean, at best, are they a bit naive? Or at worst, do you think they are displaying, some inadequacies?
I think there was perhaps a certain level of naivety around that first press conference as soon as I heard them mention that she was classified as high risk and then explain that was because she was considered to be vulnerable. I immediately thought that's not going to be a defendable position for the police. They're going to have so much pressure that sooner or later they're going to have to explain why they considered her vulnerable. And that is going to lead them down a road they didn't really want to go down because it invades the privacy of Nicola and her family quite considerably.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. I mean, is there not an argument that actually they shouldn't be giving out that kind of medical information and that this was a misstep, that effectively they're now victim blaming?
I don't think we can say it's victim blaming or a misstep. It's certainly an extraordinary level of revelation from the police about the detail of the inquiry. I think they described it as unprecedented themselves. And it certainly wouldn't be something that really is discussed in public in the vast, vast majority of cases. But they have a situation here, especially around TikTok, I understand, where there is so much speculation, so much gossip and innuendo and rumour bouncing around that it's causing hassles for the investigation. It throws up things that they need to look at just to double check there's nothing there. It throws up distractions. But perhaps more importantly, it is hugely distressing to her family and friends. And so the police have sort of acted in an attempt to try and quell that to a certain extent. But I think it's a little bit like trying to hold back the tide. In this day and age, that's going to happen. And so I think it will continue. And perhaps in future they'll decide in similar cases just to stick to the old, don't explain in detail what's going on.
OK, Peter Kirkham, former detective, chief inspector at the Met Police, thanks for your take this morning.